Last week was pretty good, 46% ROI, but to be fair, it was a pretty easy card to predict. Let's keep it going this week with UFC Fight Night Atlanta. Kicking off the night, we have Jamie Lane Horth fighting Vanessa Demopoulos. And no need to overthink this one. Vanessa Demopoulos is way too small. She's not that good. I think Jamie Lane Horth has a very easy fight. I don't think it's going to be a very entertaining fight. But Jamie Lynn Horth is massive. Look at her reach advantage as well as her leg reach advantage and her height. She is much bigger than Vanessa Demopoulos, and her, she'll just pick apart Vanessa Demopoulos, whether it's from a distance or up close. So looking at what the people think on topology as well as D ratings, seems to agree with me. So war pick here is Jamie Lynn Horth by decision. I don't recommend actually betting the decision because you never know. But pretty we're diming this. Over 1.5 is very, very safe for this fight. I just don't see any finish potential. Jamie Lynn Horth money line on its own, you might as well pair it up with over 1.5 if you're gonna bet Jamie Lynn Horth. So I'm diming that as well. For minus 334, it's not too bad for a dime. Next fight, after our first lock of the night, we have Phil Rowe fighting Angelusa, and this is the opposite. I have no idea who's going to win here, and whoever online is saying, very strongly that one guy's going to beat the other, it's bullshitting, man. There's no way. This is a very close fight. Lusa is more well-rounded. Phil Rowe's more physically, there's advantages. He's got a longer reach. Might be a better, kickboxer or whatnot. But I think the play here in this fight, look how close it is, right? It's so close. But the better play here in this fight would be the over 1.5 if you want to go round betting. Just because, Phil Rowe doesn't really like to just go all out. He's a very, stand back, jab, pick his shots kind of guy. And it takes two to make a fight, right? So because of Phil Rowe's fighting style, I do like the over 1.5, although it is minus 450, so it's not something you must have in your parlays. As for, picking the winners, nope, not doing that. If I can't even, in my good conscience, give you a pick because it's just not worth anything. Next, we have Ricky Simone fighting Cameron Smotherman. Cameron Smotherman, I was pretty big on, but then he lost to, Surrey City. And it's not the fact that he lost, but he just didn't do anything. Like, you know what I mean? There was no sense of urgency, and I was kind of disappointed in his performance. I still think that he's very talented, so I'm not 100% sure that Simone's going to just steamroll him, what most people are thinking, apparently. The pick here, he is going to be Simone. I don't think he finishes Smotherman. Because Smotherman rarely does get finished. I don't know if he's got finished before or not. But I think the good bet here would be, I don't know. I wouldn't really bet anything here. Simone, minus 550. What are you really getting? I don't think Smotherman starts 0-2 in his UFC career. And I don't think Simone's all that great, but stylistically speaking, yeah, Simone's a high pressure, high pace wrestler, which is not good news for Smotherman. So take that with whatever you think it is. And yeah, I'm not gonna bet on it, but I would understand a Simone moneyline bet over. I don't know, man. It could finish earlier. I don't think it will, so I'm gonna put it as medium confidence. Next, we have Cody Durden fighting Jose Ochoa. This is a classic example of a veteran who's not that good fighting a new up and comer who we don't know if he's that good or not. And in those situations, it's usually good to not bet. It's usually good to not bet and just wait and see, right? Is Jose Ochoa, actually, the next guy, is he good? And this is a test. It's a very hard test for him. Cody Durden is no pushover. And with Cody Durden, right, after what we've seen from him lately, he's not getting any younger, right? And his style is just, we don't know. I feel like it's very tough to pick Durden here, given that he is an underdog as well. So I feel like this is something that we pass on. We don't want to touch it. Over, under, as with most Cody Durden fights, I think over is okay. It's not great, but minus 240 is not terrible for over 1.5, but it does come with a bit of risk. So yeah, not a must-have parlay piece, but you can think about it. As for the money line, I'm not picking anything, not passing this one for sure. Next, we have the easiest fight of the year to predict. Malcolm Wellmaker fighting Chris Moutinho. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you know Chris Moutinho, he's been put in a similar situation before fighting Sean O'Malley, right? And then he lost again afterwards as well. So he's lost both UFC fights. Basically, he's like a sacrificial lamb that they feed to any newcomer who wants to fight. And Wellmaker wanted to fight this card because he's from Atlanta. So there you go. He's got the home field advantage, and he's fighting the perennial punch bag Chris Matinho. Unfortunately for us, obviously, Wellmaker is going to win this. I'll be very shocked if Wellmaker does not win. But the odds are terrible. It's minus, I think it's like 1,600 right now. It started off at 1,200, which is pretty bad as well. But that's a dime, right? That's really free. You can put that in any parlay you like, and I don't think it will backfire. Although it's not going to add too much, but hey, right? Extra 7% won't hurt. And if you want to go, with a better route, I think Wellmaker just straight up by KO at minus 250 is good. If you're worried about that submission, right? He gets Matinho down on the ground, he pulls off a rear naked or something. You can do with a KO or submission a duel, which is minus 500, so not as good. And then Wellmaker money line, if you think he's going to finish Matinho, which I think he will, under 2.5, you can do that as well. I'm very confident in all of these combinations. But in terms of dimes, the Wellmaker money line, just put it in your parlays and forget about it. Next, we have Michael Chiesa fighting Court McGee. One guy is really old and one guy is not as old, right? Court McGee is really old. He's 40 years old. That's not a good thing for UFC. Michael Chiesa is 37, which is also not very good, but compared to 40, right? He's a young buck. Statistically speaking, it's not great. Court McGee has never been submitted, and Chiesa is a submission specialist. I think this is probably going to be a boring fight, so the over is pretty good, and I think Chiesa probably wins by decision. I don't know if he submits Court McGee here. Probably wins by decision. A submission or decision combination for Chiesa is good. It's minus 280. Over 1.5 is also pretty good. Although, Court McGee did finish Tim Means, I think, in the first round in his last fight, but Chiesa fights usually last pretty long. So, yeah. And then finally, we have Paul Craig fighting Rodolfo Bellato. This fight was supposed to happen a few cards ago, but Bellato got herpes, so that got pushed to this card. And nothing too much to say about either of these guys. Paul Craig is, people remember his last-minute submission over Magomed Ankalaev, and yeah, but I mean that's who knows if that's going to ever happen again. It's always a risk, right? Paul Craig fights always a bit scary to bet on because you never know. But he should lose to Rodolfo Bellato. A lot of the question here is actually when and how, and I don't think it's going to be too early. I think a lot of people think Rodolfo Bellato is going to come out and just destroy Paul Craig in round 1. Totally possible. It is Paul Craig. He's been destroyed before in round 1. But Bellato isn't that type of fighter, though, right? He's a pretty slow starter as well. So I feel like the over 1.5 at minus 120 is a pretty nice solo bet, man. Minus 120 for over 1.5. And what could be actually a pretty boring fight in the beginning, at least, before, Craig starts to get a bit tired and loosen up and then just get destroyed. I feel like Bellato is a safe bet here. I just don't feel comfortable ever betting in a Paul Craig fight, so I'm going to personally pass. But I can totally see betting, any of these combinations for Bellato. All right, moving on to the main card. And these next two fights, most of these fights I don't really like from a betting perspective. Starting off with Alonzo Menafield fighting Omar Sy. Menafield, yeah, man, right? If you've been in the game for a while, if you know UFC, Menafield is a questionable fighter to bet on, or to watch. He's very confusing. He's got like power, but he never knocks anybody out. Apparently, he hasn't knocked anyone out in like 5 years. Omar Sy is a young dude from France. When I think of him, I think of like Cyril Gane. From another guy from France. And I think Sy is at minus 700, which is a bit steep considering Menafield does have a pathway to victory. Menafield does, right, have a big, powerful punch, so that could always end the fight. So minus 700 is a bit steep for a price to pay for a guy who isn't completely dominant. And that's a trend for the next fight as well. The minus 700 favorite isn't that great. But what I just don't see Menafield really pulling it off with an upset victory. I think Sy will win. I just don't know how. It could be a finish. It could be a submission. It could be a decision. It's questionable. It's murky. So the best bet here would actually be over 1.5 if you think that it's going to be like a slow paced, right, controlled by C, because that's what he's going to want to do. Omar C is going to want to fight from a distance, pick his shots. So if that happens, it's very likely to be over 1.5. And then C money line at minus 700. I mean, it's not bad. It's minus 700. He's probably going to win, but it's against Menafield, so I wouldn't do it. Next, we have Mansour Abdur Malik fighting Cody Brundage, and yeah, another minus 700. And I mean, I watched him at Dana White Contender Series, and he looked, if he gets his punches off, he's very strong, but like, he's not a well maker, right? When you see well maker fight, you see his like head movements, and you see how quick and everything he is. His stand up is very polished. Mansour Abdul Malik isn't like that. I think there's a lot of holes to his game, and Cody Brundage is not a pushover, right? He does get finished a lot, but he also gets a lot of finishes. So this fight, I feel like you can actually make a case for Cody Brundage to win. He can absolutely catch Mansour Abdur Malik on the feet. So I'm not so sold on that. But I mean, Cody Brundage obviously has a lot of flaws, and he can easily get just ground and pounded to oblivion by Mansour. So the odds speak for itself. In terms of my prediction, I'm gonna go with Abdul Malik in like round 2, which makes the over unders for 1.5 a bit tricky. I think under 2.5 is pretty good. Either one of those guys are probably gonna get finished in this fight. Abdul Malik by KO is also pretty good because I don't think he's ever even maybe one fight by submission. And then Brundage moneyline is a very good hedge because it's at plus 550, so you don't have to put in much to get your money back if you do bet Mansour and he ends up losing. Next, we have Cody Garbrandt versus Raoni Barcelos, and I mean, I've been watching Cody Garbrandt since forever, and back when his Dominic Cruz and TJ Dillashaw days, and it's easy to get wrapped up by what you perceive a fighter is from his past, and I just don't ever like betting in a Cody Garbrandt fight because he's probably going to be losing the fight until he wins, right? With that one punch power that he has. Raoni Barcelos is the type of guy that could be winning a fight and then to get knocked out by Cody Garbrandt. So it could be a Raoni Barcelos decision win, a submission win, or it could be a Garbrandt knockout or something. I don't know. And I don't feel like this is a good fight to bet on. If you look at what people on Topology and D rating saying, right, it's opposite, which is never a good thing when they're back and forth around the 50% mark. Not good. So we're passing that. We're not touching that at all. I don't even care about the rounds. I don't know what's going to happen in a Cody Garbrandt fight. So best not to touch this fight at all. Moving on. Next, we got Edmund Shabazian versus Andre Petroski. I'm not going to talk about either of these two guys. If you don't know Edmund Shabazian, just watch his fights. He either wins in round 1 or he just gets gassed and gives up in round 2 and 3. Andre Petroski is very chinny, which is not good fighting Edmund Shabazian. But he has a good gas tank. So we got no gas fighting no chin. And the betting is like, there's only one of two ways. And the betting here is actually pretty easy to do. If you're going to bet Petroski, which is not a bad bet, very good underdog, live dog, you might as well pair with it over 1.5 because Petroski is probably not going to finish Edmund in the first round and a half. He's most likely going to be trying to survive. Whereas if you're going to bet Edmund, you might as well pair it with under 1.5 because once the fight goes past 1.5, it's very unlikely that Edmund has the gas tank to keep up with Petroski's wrestling and grinding style. So if you put both of these bets, you can bet both of these and still come out on top no matter who wins. And that's all I have to say. I think that's pretty free money if you ask me. So when it comes to actually picking the fight, I do lean towards no chin compared to no gas. Because I feel like, to land that perfect shot is a bit harder than to just survive and grind. All right, so there you go. That fight is actually pretty free money. You can bet both guys and still win, right? Pretty cool. Next, we got Rose Namajunas fighting Miranda Maverick. And like I was saying with Cody Garbrandt, Rose is the same thing, right? When I think of Rose, I think of her amazing fights with Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Weili Zhang, right? The head kicks and everything. But Rose is so up and down, right? And her mentality, I just don't know where her mentality is. And I can't trust that she's in her right mind to fight to her top potential. Given that she's like been up and she's lost to like Carla Esparza, right? Rose in her prime would never lose to Carla Esparza in the way that she did. On the other hand, Miranda Maverick is very, very steady, right? We know what type of game she brings. High pace, wrestling. She's not like anywhere near as talented as Rose is, right? So ceiling-wise, Rose has a much higher ceiling. Floor-wise, Miranda Maverick has a much higher floor. Both are very hard to finish, barring an injury, of course, when Rose Namajunas broke her neck against Jessica Andrade. So when it comes to picking this, I do think Maverick is a pretty good pick. I know, Topology and D ratings think otherwise. I can't bring myself to trust Rose. I mean, she is a favorite, and if she fights to her best, I think she wins. But at minus 258, do you trust that Rose will be at her best? I don't. I'm going to go with the younger, probably hungrier, right, and more focused Maverick to win by decision. I think over 1.5 is really good, but it's at minus 850, so it's not really good, I guess. And Maverick by decision at plus 275 is a great underdog play. Just to dabble a little bit of units on there. Nothing too crazy though. Finally, we have the main event: Kamaru Usman fighting Joaquin Buckley. Usman is on a three fight losing streak, and he's getting old. And he's doing like a podcast with Triple C. So you have to wonder where his mind is, right? And it's so important for UFC fighters to be hungry, right, and to want things. Usman was dominant in welterweight because he had the mental edge, first of all, right? In the stare downs before the fights, you can see his face. Like, his opponents are pretty much scared of him already before the fight even starts. And he's also got the physical edge because he was so physically dominant, right? Not just as a wrestler, but just every aspect of him. And that's not the case anymore. When he's 30 years old, he's got no knees, right? And he's got, his fighting years are catching up to him, right? And Buckley is someone who is not intimidated by Usman at all. Buckley has a very strong mental game himself. And physically speaking, Usman's got no edge over Buckley, at least not the 38-year-old Usman. Buckley is a physical specimen. So put those together, and it's not looking like Usman has any way to win the fight. You might think Usman can, wrestle. He's a great wrestler. He doesn't wrestle that much in his fights. And Buckley's a great wrestler too. So that is out the window. So I think Buckley's going to win this fight. I think Usman is just too old. And I think he might retire after this fight. This might be it for Usman. Great career, though. Love the guy. In terms of what people think, most people do think that Buckley will win. And in terms of prediction, I think Buckley will actually get the finish in the championship rounds, maybe round 4. Usman is quite tanky. But what I really like about this is the over 1.5 is only minus 450. That is really, really good for a fight that is almost destined to go over 1.5, just because of how 5-rounders go. Especially with Usman, who is really tanky, and they start slow, right? Buckley starts slow, Usman starts slow. So over 1.5 is really, really good. It should really be placed at like minus 850. It really should, but it's at minus 450, which is a parlay gold, right? And I also think Buckley should beat Usman, just because of the age gap and the hunger and the physique and everything, right? Usman just has no edge over Buckley anywhere. So pairing Buckley with over 1.5 gives you minus 150, which is a very good single bet or a parlay piece as well.